Good morning. So today I'm going to talk to you about how to turn your logs into actionable data at any scale with AWS. So I'm Andrew Pearce. I'm a Senior Systems Development Engineer with Amazon Web Services. So what can we expect from today's session? I'm going to be talking quite heavily about the Kinesis agent for Windows and what this agent is and how it can help you take your logs from running in Amazon EC2, from running on-premises, from running Windows systems anywhere you are, and streaming your data into AWS so you can do things with it, so you can take action from it, so you can understand what you have and what you can do with it. We'll demonstrate the agent by streaming data into AWS, and we're going to use Amazon Athena, which I'll talk about, to query that data using SQL-like language. We'll talk about the configuration options in depth of the agent. So there was a few logs that we couldn't process. There were no log agents that could actually read our logs that we had at Amazon. So this agent was developed partially to be very powerful at streaming logs of any type, no matter how they're formatted, no matter how your vendor formats a log. This agent can likely read it and transform the data so it's actually usable for you downstream. Then we'll demonstrate some very close to real-time processing using AWS Lambda. So we'll be streaming logs from our system, PowerShell script block logs, processing them with PowerShell in Lambda, reading the AST from the logs, and publishing metrics of what commands are being invoked in our systems. And you'll see how close to real time we can get this actually running with basically PowerShell and just PowerShell. So firstly, why the Kinesis agent for Windows? Well, we're also trying to build disposable Windows platforms, right? We all don't want those pets. We don't want to worry about their names. We want to have systems that when we get paged in the middle of the night, we can turn them off, not worry about them, and a new one comes up and everything's back online. The downside to that is if you haven't got your logs off your system, you've lost all the information you need to do a root cause analysis, find out what happened and prevent it from happening the next time. So this is all well and good as we're moving down that path. We need to remember to get all the things off the system we're going to need to troubleshoot after we turn it off. And AWS has a lot of analytical capabilities. Lots of companies are using AWS, streaming data into the platform, using services such as Kinesis Data Streams, Athena, Elasticsearch with the Kibana endpoint in front of it, or Lambda to process their logs. So we'll talk about what these are in more depth as we go, but there's lots of capabilities to do so many different things with your logs with AWS. It's a nice place to put them. And so we want to do that from Windows as well. So what is the Kinesis agent for Windows? It's a .NET agent that's very configurable and extensible. You can read any log, send it to any destination, and if you have your own internal endpoints, your own customization requirements, developers can take this excuse me, and extend it because all the plugins are written using standardized APIs. So we'll talk about that more. It's about streaming logs, event logs, Exchange, SharePoint, flat directory, flat file logs, events, so event tracing for Windows, we can read those and stream them up into the cloud, or performance counters. So we can take performance counters from Windows, post them as metrics to AWS. You can create alarms and dashboards off those metrics. And it runs on Windows, desktops, or servers, no matter where they're running. If they're in Amazon EC2, on premises, it makes no difference. You just need to be able to post information to the internet, and the agent can do its job. And it's entirely open source. So if you want to go look at the source code, go and have a look at it. If you need to extend it, if you have issues, it's 100% open sourced in the GitHub repository. So you can go and look at what it's doing and be confident that it does what you need it to do. It's a little overview, because it's important to understand how this works. The plugin model, every plugin in the agent that ships with it is developed using a standardized set of APIs, no matter what that plugin is. So anyone can extend this agent to read from any data source or to post to any data source. And really, any source and any destination was a key driver of this agent. We didn't want to limit our service teams or our public customers to what you can do with your data. It supports data extraction. So if you have a log that is plain text, you can rip data out of it and construct rich objects to be used downstream. So you don't have to do your regex downstream. You can do it on box to speed up the downstream processing. Transformation. Same kind of idea. We can take that data and transform it into a different data set so we can do more with it downstream. And decoration. Sometimes we have logs that don't have things like the computer name that the log came from. which isn't really useful, or a timestamp. Maybe you've got a log that doesn't even have a timestamp record in it. So when you get that downstream, what do you do with it? Well, you're trying to troubleshoot, here's this log, when did it happen? So we can add data to our logs as well when they're coming off the box by adding computer names, timestamps, any real value you want. So again, it's more useful downstream when you need to use your log to do something. Now this source pipe sync idea, you'll see shortly, Kinesis tap was our internal name from it. So the idea of a tap where water flows from any number of sources through pipes to any number of sinks, that's kind of the idea of the naming here. And that's really the idea. Many sources to many destinations through pipes. So it's completely configurable and you can decide exactly where you want your data to flow. So the decoration idea as well, one example for this, and we've got a blog post about this using this for DHCP logs. So Windows DHCP logs do not contain the computer name field. And when we're processing our DHCP logs, we're trying to troubleshoot some lease refusals for our customers. We had no idea where the log came from. So we had 2 hosts in our cluster, and we had this log entry saying lease refusal. Great. It didn't help us at all. So being able to add data to your logs and do this transformation of things is really helpful for you as you're trying to use your logs. And we're going to jump straight into a demo, because everyone loves demos. I haven't recorded, but we're going to do it live, because that's way more fun. So let's talk through what I'll demonstrate for you. We're going to use the Systems Manager product to install the agent. Now, I'm going to do this once to one machine, but it can be done to fleets anywhere in the world very quickly. I'm going to use Session Manager. Little talk about that, little sidebar. It allows me to create an interactive PowerShell session on my target machine with only outbound communications. So I don't have no firewall ports, don't need public IP addresses. I can just create this session and use it. I'm going to configure the agent to post data to Kinesis data Firehose. So what is Firehose? Well, it's a really easy way to load streaming data at any scale into AWS analytical tools. So you can post from many, many thousands of sources, any size of data, and Kinesis will expand what it needs to do to make sure it continually ingests that data, so you don't have to think about how much data you're throwing at the service. We'll use Kinesis data Firehose. We're going to put that data into Amazon Simple Storage Service, Amazon S3. This is an object level storage with 11 nines of durability. So it's a great place to store logs for archival or for processing later on. Just remember to keep your bucket private. We've had too much of that. Now we're going to use AWS Glue to transform this data. So Glue is an extract, transform, and load service, fully managed, and it can do all the things for you. We can point Glue at my bucket. It's going to read all the data in my bucket, figure out the schema of my data without me doing anything, create a table, start ingesting my data into my table, and I haven't done any work on that. I've just pointed it to my data source. So especially for things like Windows event logs, when it's a really defined schema, it can just do all that work for you. You schedule it to run whenever you want, you walk away, and you don't do anything. There's no management of that ETL. Question? It'll detect that. So next time it reads the data source, it'll identify that and add columns to your table as it goes. You can change that as well. So you have full control over that schema. So if you don't like the schema it gives you, you can go and customize that all you want. But for many use cases we've seen in Windows, and especially because it's very common schemas, you don't really have to do much at all. So Glue will load a data catalog into its data catalog service. And then we're going to use Athena, which is a product that lets me do SQL queries against that data source to query my data just like I would using a SQL database. So it's a very common language, and we all pretty much know SQL. So let's go and do this and walk through what's going to happen. Good old Wi-Fi. Get back in. So I'm doing this from an EC2 instance, basically running in the cloud. I'm running Mac, and the agent doesn't support Mac, so we're going to do it from the cloud instead. So the first thing, we're going to look at the configuration file. Now this is a simple demo. I've got one log I'm going to process, and we'll look at what that config file looks like, and then we'll look at what the installation looks like and go and run through it. So let's make this nice and big. So you can see this is a simple JSON file. I've got 3 main sections. sources, sinks, and pipes. I'm going to define for my sources first. I have a unique identifier. My source type is of a Windows event log source. Now I'm going to talk a lot more about what other sources you can do shortly. I just wanted to show it to you first. I'm going to look at the system log name, standard Windows event log, system log. We're going to publish this to a sink. This is a Kinesis data Firehose sync type. Again, I'll talk about the different sync types shortly. AWS region, UAC2, the name of my stream, and then this is a really nice one. I'm going to format this as JSON. So we don't need this field at all, and we can send the raw data upstream. But who wants to do regex against raw data? So we'll let the agent convert that for me, and then I'll have just a nice structured JSON downstream to be able to process really easily. My pipe, and it's pretty obvious, a reference to my source and a reference to my sink. My source is Windows event log type, other way, source. My sink is a Kinesis data Firehose. My pipe just hooks them together, and data is going to flow. And self-update 0, the agent will actually self-update itself. Now you can configure how it updates, where it updates from, what versions to go to, or you can just let the agent update to the latest version at all times. And it will do that for you. It'll automatically load its configuration and basically manage itself. Let's look at the install script. So if any of you installed Chocolatey, this will look very similar. Go to the top. So the service name I'm going to look at is AWS Kinesis Tap. And as I mentioned, this is our internal log agent as well. And internally, it is called Kinesis Tap. And when we open sourced this, there were some pieces of the code base that were just left alone due to the timeframes and the amount of places that it references Kinesis Tap. We just left that naming in there. So when you see Kinesis Tap naming through configuration files, it is the same agent. It's just the internal naming for it. So to install this, I'm going to download a PS1 file from S3 and run it. Feel free to go and look at the PS1 file, look what it does. But as in beta, earlier this week, the beta product for this does have an MSI installer now. So if you'd rather install via MSI instead of running a PowerShell script, you can also do that. So I'm going to import the AWS PowerShell module and download that configuration file from an S3 bucket. Now, after I've done this, I can actually configure the agent to point to a configuration file. So I can install the agent and just say, look at this path to S3. The agent itself will actually go out and check that configuration file at periods of time. So if I update that object, all my agents across my entire fleet can update themselves with a new config, and I haven't had to reach out to anything. So it'll also auto-load itself. Then I'm going to start the agent. It does start stopped, because by default, there's no configuration, so there's no point starting the agent. So we'll start the agent, then we'll just show you that it is actually running. So let's go there and go to my console. I'm going to come over to Systems Manager and install it. So as I said, I'm going to use Session Manager to do this, but I could use Run Command to invoke this PowerShell script remotely. I could use State Manager to invoke this PowerShell script remotely on a schedule. You could use SECM, you could use whatever distribution method you want. So I'm going to start a session to my machine. So this will be a PowerShell session running in a browser against my remote machine. It's fully interactive. I've got tab completion and everything like that. So I'm just going to paste that script block in here and let it do its thing. So as soon as I've done this and the agent has started, it's going to start streaming my system log straight away. Now there's a few options we can do here. By default, it will start reading from the point the agent starts from then on. You can configure it to read from the start of your log all the time, or you can do bookmarking, which I'll talk about more later, but it can actually keep track of where it's up to in your log and start from there every single time. So you'll never have duplicated data, and you won't be missing data either. So that's running. So let's have a go and have a look at what the log has said for this. There is a log that will show you what's happening. So this is in program data. And so if you look at this log, there's not a whole lot in here, but it is saying that it connected my source to my sink. So this is up and running right now. So I'm just going to restart the Windows Update Agent service, and then we'll use that to query shortly. So if we're going to go through my AWS account now and sort of walk through the tree of where this data is going now that it's starting to flow. So the first thing I'm going to do is head over to the data Firehose and show you that configuration. So I pre-deployed this Firehose. They can take a few minutes to stand up. Remember when you deploy this, AWS is turning on all this infrastructure to support you as a customer. So it can take 2 or 3 minutes to stand up the Firehose, so I just pre-deployed this to save some time. But if you look at this, there's not a whole lot I've configured here. Right? I've turned this on, and if I scroll down, I'm saying my source is direct put. What this means, you can stream into a Firehose from other services in AWS. This is saying that something is going to put data into my Firehose directly. You can transform your data with AWS Lambda. So every record that comes through your Firehose, you can fire off a Lambda function, process the data, modify your data, and either not return the data or return the data. So you can actually do full transformations with Lambda as well with this service. And of course, you can do that with PowerShell now. You can convert your record format if you need to, but of course, we're doing that ourselves in the agent. We're letting our agent convert to JSON for me. So the real key here is my S3 destination for this example. So I'm pointing it at a bucket with a prefix, so you can prefix these things in your bucket. Every megabyte or 60 seconds, the data will be dumped into my bucket for me. Now, don't do that in production. Turn on encryption, encrypt everything. But for demos, I'm not going to use the encryption. So we load in my bucket, we can see I've already got data in here. I should have showed you this before, but this was actually empty before. If I browse through this folder structure, we can see that this is a date-stamped folder all the way down to a file. If I open this file, this is going to be just raw information. VS Code, where are you? All right, so I have one event log in here. My Windows Update service started. So I'm going to go generate a few more logs, because why not? So let's come in here, and we'll just restart that a few times. So now let's go and query this. So I'm going to come into Glue. I haven't configured Glue yet, so I'm going to configure this and tell it to start streaming this data in. And it'll go and do all the magic and figure out what is in this log file. So if we come over to the Glue service, so again, not sure how many of you have used SQL to do ETL processing, but I know I've done it in the past. I didn't like configuring my ETL and figuring out my schemas and how big is my text field? Is it an integer? Is it going to be a string? I don't like doing that, so I want this to do it for me. So I'm going to come over to my Glue crawlers and configure a crawler to crawl my data store. So add a crawler, I'm going to call this event logs. And again, there's many options here. I'm just going super simple. So crawl the bucket I selected, the system log prefix, which I configured before. I don't need another data source. I need an IAM role. So AWS security is #1, and it always will be #1. What this means is Glue doesn't have access to query your bucket. Glue doesn't have access to create a table in your account. So you have to explicitly grant the Glue service access to do the things you want it to do. So you have full control over this. You can revoke it at any point in time. But you have to explicitly tell the service it can do something in your account. I already have that. It's a new demo. And we're going to run this on demand. So I could schedule it to run at whatever frequency I desire, but I'm just going to do it on demand right now. Now, you could throw this into an existing database in your data catalog. As I don't have one, I'm going to add a database and call that event logs as well. You can add prefixes to your tables. So if you had one data catalog database and you wanted to take the same data set and ingest at different times, maybe with different date fields, you can prefix the tables here, and that will all be managed by Glue for you again. But I'm just going to go through this, finish, and run that now. So this is going to take around about a minute. So depending on your data size, clearly if you've got terabytes or petabytes of data, this will take a while. But it takes about a minute for this, where it'll go out, get all that JSON, it's going to load it into the Glue service, look through all the code, find the schema of the code, detect what fields are what, then dump it into a table for me to go and use later on. And I like this because I don't like figuring out data formats. I don't like doing schemas. So that should be not far from being done. So Glue can actually crawl different data sources too. So if you're using Amazon DynamoDB, it's not the best product for querying data from for like SQL-like queries or further downstream warehousing. So Glue can actually take a DynamoDB database and stream that across as well. So you can take data sources from S3, DynamoDB, other places like Redshift, put it in all one place and querying it all using SQL-like language. All right, so that's finished now, stopping, but it's added one table. Let's go and have a look what that's done. So table's here, and I've got this system log table. Let's go and view my data. All right, so select star from event log, system log, limit 10. It's just a SQL transaction. It's just a SQL statement. And I can clearly modify this so where event ID is 7036. This is just standard TSQL. If I can type my TSQL, limit 10. All right, so this is just exactly what you expect from a SQL thing. So like update. Yeah, so this can be a pretty powerful tool if you have a once-off security event that you need to go and research. Because the data in S3 is partitioned down to year, month, days, you can go and take that one little data set you need, ingest it into this service, and start querying it with SQL. So it can be a really great service for those off-the-cuff, one-off requirements to go and search your data and find out what's happening on your systems. All right, so I'm going to preload one thing for the next demo right now, because I found that if I don't reboot my machine, the next demo doesn't really work. So I'm going to go and enable PowerShell logging. So my next demo, I'm actually going to process the PowerShell script block logs from my system in Lambda. So I'm going to configure that right now, reboot the box, then go back to the slides. So this is just setting the standard registry keys that group policy would set for you, just to enable script block logging on my machine. All right, restart computer. And we'll hope that's back by the time I get to it. All right. So you've seen there that the agent's pretty easy to install. I ran a PowerShell script. I downloaded a file from S3. I started a service. Agent started throwing data at the cloud. And I can query that very easily by configuring that catalog. It figured out my schema for me, and I can just start querying my data within minutes. So it's a very powerful capability. But really, the agent can do a whole lot more than that. And that's a fairly simple use case. So what else can the agent do for me? So we'll start by talking about the source and looking at what we can do from a source perspective, because really this is the key. Right? This is where your data is today. So from source options, Windows performance counters. You have Windows performance counters in your systems. These are telling you clearly all sorts of cool information. But what are you doing with it? What can you do with it? Well, with AWS, we've got a service called Amazon CloudWatch, where you can throw metrics to it. You can migrate, you can do math on your metrics, you can dashboard your metrics, or you can create alarms off your metrics. So one thing you could do is configure the agent to start streaming data to the cloud, to metrics. And on the lack of a metric, you could alarm. So this would indicate that the agent stopped working, or your system has stopped generating the data you expect it to generate. So the lack of data could actually be used as an alarm here, or too much data or standard alarming. But you can do that, and that alarming could send you an SMS, it could send you an email, you can run Lambda functions. That alarm you could use with Lambda to then go and run a run command against your system, restart the service automatically. So you could actually take action from that and actually try and fix the problem before you even get a ticket. And no one wants that ticket, so that's a cool capability. Obviously, we have to support Windows event logs. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. Event tracing for Windows. So this is where Microsoft is sending a whole bunch more trace sort of information for some of the new things they're releasing. So we can support that as well, so you can get really deep tracing information from your systems. And flat files. I mean, this is the vast bulk of our logs on Windows. IIS, Exchange, SharePoint, DHCP, third-party vendor applications that just write files to disk. This is where the agent really has to perform very well. So from a directory source, there's a few things we can do. Single line logs. You've got a log entry, it's one line, there's a carriage return at the end of it. Great, that's pretty easy. What are multi-line logs, where maybe you have a timestamp and 17 logs of rows of data, and then another timestamp, and the timestamp is the key of your log entry. So we can use Regex to find the timestamp and take that and everything after it and take that as a record to throw to the cloud. Or maybe a DHCP log has 17 lines of data at the top, which is useless. It's header information. So we can skip the first X number of lines. Or you can provide a regex to say, every time this regex matches, just don't log that because it's useless information for me. So there's lots of things we can do with the agent to make sure we're only sending the data we need to into the cloud. And that saves you money. You're not putting data to the cloud where you don't need to. And it reduces your processing requirements because you've got less to process downstream. And as I mentioned, bookmarking. So this is a very highly required service. So third-party logs rotate. Now you have a file name. It becomes file name _1, _2, _3. Those logs are rotating between files, or they're overwriting your logs as they go. So with the bookmarking feature, the agent can keep track of the timestamps and the data it's up to. So it will only send the next set of data that needs to be sent up. This can also cache information. So if you're on an on-premises environment and your internet goes down, and you have rolling logs, the agent can actually be picking up this information, caching it in its own file store. So if your internet goes down, it's still picking up the logs you need, and as soon as the internet's available, it can then ship that data up. So it's going to be very good at making sure you don't lose data. So Regex Passing. This was a really powerful capability for us. If we look at this example log at the top, we have a severity of error, we have a timestamp, the source of the log, and what type of, and the record of the log. And that's really useless downstream. Now, you can't figure out the schema for that very easily. I don't want to write that regex in my Lambda function to go and process that every time, because all I'm doing there is adding compute time to my Lambda service downstream. We have Windows systems with 4 CPUs sitting at 1% CPU usage. So why not use that CPU to be doing all this work for me, so downstream, things are a whole lot simpler. So the agent can do that, where I can feed a regex pattern, pull out that timestamp, and use that timestamp in my log record that's being sent to the cloud. But additionally, we can use this for data extraction. So we can make this regex more complex, but now get a structured object downstream. So the same sort of thing, I don't have to pass that record downstream. I've just got a JSON, and everything works with JSON. So we can do some really cool data extractions here to make sure you get just the fields you need. I could quite as easily not include these fields. Maybe you don't care that this came from the system log, so we just won't include that in my data object. The other one here is you can set up multiple sources. I could watch the same log file with different configurations with different regex requirements, sending different data sets to different downstream services. So if you have security teams that need one set of data and you want your own set of data, you can just watch it twice, do different things with your logs. So the source, it's very powerful. There's built-in types for those other ones like Exchange and SharePoint. You don't have to configure that. It's built-in types that it knows what those logs look like, and it'll funnel them up as you need. And if you find sources the agent won't read, please file an issue with the GitHub repository. The goal of this agent is any source. So if you're finding something that is not working as you expect, please reach out on GitHub and file an issue. And the team will be good to get back to you and make sure that we can actually read that data source. So the sync is kind of the next most important bit here. We've read our data, we've structured it to a rich object, and now we want to put it to something downstream. And what can we put it to? So out of the box, by default, we support these services. So Kinesis data streams. This is a massively scalable data streaming service that can stream records from millions and millions of event sources in a very durable fashion into AWS. This is being used for click streams, log ingestion, data events, database logs. It's a really great way of streaming data into the cloud, especially if you want real-time processing of that data. And that's what data streams is all about. Data Firehose is more about ingesting gigabytes and petabytes of data into the cloud and saving it somewhere for some other service to come along and process it. So this is where you may not be doing real-time processing, but if you want to be like a minute delayed, 3 minutes delayed, this is a really good way of ingesting data at massive scale into AWS. CloudWatch has support for logging, so you could stream your logs into CloudWatch logs as well. It can be more limiting than streaming to Firehose because it doesn't have as many downstream services it can plug into. But if you have a requirement for CloudWatch logs, the agent can process logs to there as well. And CloudWatch metrics, this is where we send the performance counters, right? This is a metrics platform, so that's where the performance counters will go. So downstream from these services is really where the power becomes. If you want live streaming data to data streams, this is where you'd use Lambda. Process that data as it's coming through as quick as you can to get real-time data out of your systems. Or Kinesis Data Firehose can go to these other services such as Elasticsearch. You configure your Firehose to point to your Elasticsearch and you walk away and your data appears in Elasticsearch, or S3, or Redshift. So Redshift is a data warehousing solution for petabyte scale data. So you can scale from nothing to petabytes and petabytes of data with very quick query times, and Firehose can directly ingest data into Redshift. So this is the out-of-the-box support, but as I said, the agent's very extensible. So if you have developers and you have your own custom endpoint you need, they can extend the agent and add a new data sync for your requirements. So this is open source agent. You can use this on your machine and not funnel any data to AWS if you don't want to. Right? Go and do what you want with it. We're here to help you, and so this agent can do that no matter what source or sync you have. Now on the source, we could do cool things. We could do regex to transform my data, to extract my data. On the sync, we can do stuff too. So on the sync, we can decorate my data. So this is where we can do something with a config like this, where I'm going to say, add my computer name to the record, some colons, here's my timestamp value that I'm taking from my local system time on my machine, some colons, and then here's my record. So this is great for those vendor logs where you don't get a timestamp, where you don't get the computer name. We just don't get the information you need to actually make your logs useful. So add data to your logs as required on the source machine, makes it more useful downstream. And in addition to that, we can make an object. So we can stream that text to the cloud, but now I have to split on my colons and make sure I pull it all together. Or we can just pass that as a JSON. So we can construct a JSON with new information from your system and send that downstream. And part of that you saw, I was replacing the computer name. So we have this variable substitution where we can ingest environment variables, SSM tags, EC2 tags. I'm not sure if SSM's there yet. It should be, Javier. Or EC2 tags or local variables from your instance metadata in Amazon EC2. There's a number of places that we can ingest different variables into that log from. And again, if you have different data, different requirements for that, file an issue, and the team will get back and try and make sure that can happen. So we have a source that's very configurable. You can change your data. We have a sync that's very configurable, where we can change your data there as well. What about the pipe that connects them up? So let's talk about that pipe. So in a simple declaration of this you saw before, source reference, sync reference, throw the data there, job done. But you may have something like Active Directory log, your security log for AD. Your security team wants all the things. Just give them every bit of data you can. You are looking for computer objects. So you just want the event IDs related to a computer object. Maybe your HR team just want the event logs related to user objects. But you don't want to configure your source 3 times, because that means you're going to read from your event log 3 times. So what we can do with a pipe is we can configure it with filtering. So read your source once. Get that event log once, very quickly. I'm not going to read it twice. Have 3 different syncs configured for my 3 different downstream requirements. And I hook that one source up to multiple syncs, and I can fan out that data on my agent. So you can fan the data out in the cloud, or you can fan out the data on your agent as well. So it's very configurable, and you can do all sorts of cool things with the agent when you think about that capability. And the pipe is also configurable from an extensibility standpoint. So if there's other things you want the pipe to do, it's open source software, so go and have a look at it and add your own requirements or file feature requests. Right, log processing. Now, I love PowerShell and Lambda. I'm a little bit biased. But we can use this to do real-time processing of our logs. So we're going to demonstrate this. I'm going to update my configuration to point my PowerShell script block logs to a different location, to a data stream. And I have a Lambda hooked up to my data stream. So I have a PowerShell function that will take my ingestion data. I'm going to look at this data source and file metrics into the cloud. And we'll see how quickly we can get this to run through. So let's go and demonstrate that. Connect again. So this is something, this demonstration, and we can turn on script block logging and capture literally all the PowerShell that's invoked in our systems. So this example could be, how often are people running certain functions? And maybe people are running get S3 bucket too frequently. I don't know, like take your pick. But this is a way where you can post metrics from every single function that every single computer is running on your machine. And just start identifying what people are doing in PowerShell. So if we come to this code, we'll have a look at the new config file. So these are the exact same as before, but I've added a new source, my PowerShell log. It's the same event log source type because this is a Windows event log. This time I'm looking at the PowerShell operational log. I'm doing this query, which I didn't talk about before. So not only am I reading my log, and I can configure this to decorate and transform data source, I'm going to query my event log and just get the logs I need. So again, we're not reading all the logs and then filtering them in a pipe. We're just going to read the logs we want and filter them in the pipe. So now I'm making sure my system's doing less and less and less and just the bits I need it to do. My sync, just like before, but it's a stream data type now because I'm using data streams. I'm still going to use JSON because I don't want raw text. And my pipe is just like before. I'm hooking up a source to a sink. I'm not doing anything regex fancy here. I enabled script block logging before, so I don't have to do that. So I'll show the dashboard shortly. But the only difference I'm doing with this install, my agent's ready in my box, so I don't need to install it again. So I'm just going to download a new config file and then show that it is actually real-time updating the agent. So we'll copy that and head to my console again. So into Systems Manager, into Session Manager, create that interactive console again. Paste that in and read my config file. Yes, our module is very large. It takes far too long to import. All right, so here's my log. And what we can see here, those last few lines, config file changed. So now it's realized, oh, there's a change in that. I'm going to reload my configuration and start just doing all the new things without starting the service again. Just here's a new config, start doing the things. The good thing with that is because of the bookmarking feature, I'm going to restart my config, but I know exactly where I was up to when I stopped. So again, it's loading the config again, but it's not going to change what data is getting funneled through the system. So I'm going to show my dashboard now, and then we're going to run some commands. So if we come over into CloudWatch dashboards, I have a dashboard here that's looking at getChildItem. And I'm going to set this for a shorter time period. This is going to refresh every 10 seconds. So you can see I have nothing coming up in my logs. So if we run getChildItem, and we run this a bunch of times, I don't know, 8 times, I have no idea how many times I send that. We come to CloudWatch logs. Now, this is going to fire into Lambda, and you can see logs are already coming in. These are cold start Lambdas, and these haven't been invoked yet because no data is coming through. So the data is going to data streams. My Lambda function had a cold start, started processing these logs, and is already posting data. And that was there seconds ago. So this is very close to real time. Right? This is really quick. And to just do again, and there's about 3 more. So this will only take a few seconds. I'm going to refresh that. And that data, in fact, it's come to the same timestamp. So that's up to 14 now. So this data is coming from my system. through data streams, into Lambda functions, into CloudWatch metrics in what, a second? So this is really quick. Right? So if you need real-time, fast processing of your data, this agent can be really powerful for enabling you to do that. Really, that's what this agent's all about. Take your logs and enable you to use your logs to do something you couldn't do before. Right? So think outside the box. Integrate with Lambda, which is now your business logic, your code, and literally do anything. And that Lambda function is PowerShell as well, so you're not changing what you're doing. So I encourage you to go and check this out. If you want to be able to use the logs, this is a really powerful capability and something you likely didn't have before. So let's go back to the slides and kind of wrap up. So to wrap up, the agent's very simple to install. It's a PowerShell script, download it, run it, or as I said, there's a beta MSI already available. So in the coming weeks, the MSI will move to our production bucket, and you'll have access to an MSI for installing as well. It's very flexible configuration options. You can pick any data source, any data target, modifying your data as you're going through, so it's very powerful there. Any source, any destination. That's a really key one for this agent. So if you can't read your source, please let us know because we want to help you read any data sources you have. And it's extensible. So if you have dev teams and you want to develop this to some internal log ingestion platform you have, you can extend this. It's a standard set of APIs, and the dev teams can do that for you. It integrates with AWS, obviously. And by integrating to AWS, there are many analytical capabilities to do a whole range of things against your data, whether it's SQL queries, whether it's throwing your data to Elasticsearch and having a Kibana web interface in front of it, or whether it's anything you want by using Lambda. There are many ways you can use this. And if you want to keep track of what's happening, I encourage you to watch the GitHub, go and star it and watch it. This is where releases and updates are clearly going to happen because it's all in the open source. Thank you very much. And any questions? Cool. Well, thank you very much. Hope you learned something. And feel free to find me if you want to know more about it. Thank you.